How you doing, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wilde's Mailbox here at ESPNMilwaukee.com and ESPNMadison.com. I've got three questions for you today via Twitter. The first one comes from Brandon, who wonders, what was your take on the Pro Bowl last night in Miami kicking off Super Bowl week? I'd give it a C+. Brandon also asked that question of my buddy Jim Rutledge from 100.5 ESPN Madison. Brandon, I was unimpressed with the Pro Bowl, but I would say it was more entertaining than watching a training camp practice. Thought Aaron Rodgers played well, but it's awfully easy to do that against a defense that doesn't seem to be trying all that hard. I was a little bit surprised that the Packers-Cardinals game actually outscored the Pro Bowl, given that those defenses were allegedly trying and the AFC and NFC squads weren't. I'm anxious to see how this changes maybe the NFL's outlook on the Pro Bowl and how fans may be treated, though, by having it the week before the Super Bowl. We saw a big bump in television ratings because of the timing of the game, I think. They were up about 40% over recent years. It was the most watched Pro Bowl since 2000, which was on ABC, so it was the highest watched All-Star game ever on cable television. But again, even though the television numbers may be better, I don't think that that necessarily translates into greater relevance. Next year, it goes back to Hawaii. They've got a 2-year deal to return to Honolulu. However, they have not decided yet when the game will be played, if it'll be played again on the Sunday before the Super Bowl, or if it may move back to its traditional spot, which would be the week after the Super Bowl. I'm guessing, based on the numbers they got last night on ESPN, though, that they're probably going to go before the Super Bowl and hope that that continues that trend. Our other questions, one comes from JJ, who wants to know, if I can get back to his question here on my Twitter, where do you feel the Brewers will finish in the NL Central this year, and also what, if any, moves will the Packers make to improve? Well, I picked JJ's question, one, because I'm hoping that the Brewers win the NL Central, and I get to do that because I don't cover them. But there are a few other people that probably have a better idea than I do. Sounds like Madison just woke up. As for your other question, JJ, I think that this is going to be a very interesting offseason to see how Ted Thompson plays it and whether or not he goes off the board a little bit and makes some moves in free agency. We know he did it in 2006 when he got Ryan Pickett and Charles Woodson. This year it's a little bit different because they've got a lot of their own free agents that they have to decide what they're going to do with. The Aaron Campmans, the Mark Tauschers, the Chad Cliftons, the Ryan Picketts. And then there's the restricted free agents, that guys that had been in line for unrestricted free agency. It's very clear that they're not going to get a deal done on the CBA, and those guys will be restricted. So it'll be easier to keep, but there's still some decisions to be made there. I know there's a lot of people buzzing about, Julius Peppers isn't coming back to Carolina. Would the Packers be interested? Sean Merriman, and whether or not he's a fit for the Packers scheme. And I have to say, I look at those, and I'm not completely dismissing those two guys out of hand, but that strikes me as fantasy football-ish, as Ted Thompson would call it. That those are names that we're all familiar with. We know they're good players, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Packers would pursue them. So that answers that question, at least temporarily. We've still got a little ways to go before we get to free agency and things start to get more interesting on that front. My last question comes from Jared with the very creative Twitter moniker of Pointer QB7, which I know why that is, because Jared is the former quarterback for the UW-Stevens Point Pointers. And his question is, what do you think of D3 sports in Wisconsin? The WIAC seems to be the dominant D3 conference. Agreed? Well, of course I agree, Jared. I'm not going to dispute that with one of the quarterbacks from that conference. But I will. It does allow me to tell you a pretty good story that I always have enjoyed retelling. And that was my experience covering Division III football. I went in 2005 when the UW Whitewater Warhawks, your rival, were playing in the Amos Alonzo Stagg Bowl, which has become a yearly tradition for that team. But it was back when Bob Brezowitz was the coach. The Packers actually had a Monday night game in Baltimore, which isn't that far from Virginia, the place in Virginia, Salem, Virginia, where they play the Amos Alonzo Stagg Bowl for the D3 championship. So Tom Oates from the State Journal, our columnist, and me, who was still at the State Journal at the time, we went out a day early, and instead of going to Baltimore, we went to Salem, Virginia, and we covered that game. And it was disappointing that they lost. Justin Beaver played really well. They lost to Mount Union, which has obviously become the big rival in terms of the postseason there for the Warhawks. But it was really neat to see how appreciative those guys were that two guys who cover the NFL were at their game and covered it. Bob Brezowitz really appreciated it. I wish they had won because it would have been a much better story, and I think they would have certainly had better memories of that. But they ended up winning later on. So I've always enjoyed D3 sports. The times that I've watched it, not as a journalist but as a fan, I think we're lucky to have great Division III sports, not only in football but basketball too, here in the state of Wisconsin. That does it for today's Wilde's Mailbox. We got a little off track. Brewers, Division III sports. We'll try and get a little more Packers related, but again, if you want to send your questions in, you can email them to jwilde@espnwisconsin.com. You can also put in a request to have Paula wander through the background of our videos like she did the other day. You can also send them on Twitter as we had them today, as long as you can get them into 140 characters or less. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.